We continue now at the top of Daf Vav and Beis in Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 6b. On the previous Talmud, the Gemara brought a statement from Rav Nachman in the name of Rabba Bar Avu. If somebody rents a place to his friend, Bibira Gedol, in a large house, Rashi here explains, Bira Gedol Bayis Aruch Mode. We're talking about a very long house. V'cholak mitocho laharbe chadarim, and it's divided into many rooms. Chadarim ketanos, many small rooms. V'hiskir lozeh echad mehen. And so this person rents out one of the rooms to this person. So as we're going to go on to say, Hareza mishtamish biksole bechore haksolim. He's allowed to use the holes in the walls, al pnei orcha, along the length, mi bachutz, from the outside, ad daled amos, even until 4 amos, av shelo keneged beso, even if it's not exactly corresponding to his house where he is. Uvezizim hayotzim miksolim, and also anything that's projecting out from the walls, he can use that as well. Again, so bebira gedol, in this large house, he's renting out a room. Mishtamish, so the renter is allowed to use bezizeh uvechsaleh. He can use that projecting out of the wall, and he can use the holes in the wall ad daled amos, until 4 amos. Uva hakosel b'makom shenago. He can also use the thickness of the wall if that is the local custom. Rashi says uva hakosel barosho, meaning he can put things on the top of the wall. Kagonim hiskir lo ba aliyah, for example. Let's say he rented one of the upper floors. He is allowed to do that as well. Avol betarbitz apadni lo. However, he's not allowed to use tarbitz apadni. Rashi explains avol betarbitz apadni lo. Derech bone birach hashuva. Those who are building a large building like this, laniach lo keneged pesach hatraklin hachoshev. So in the main entrance, corresponding to the main entrance, there used to be a small garden. La'aver, it was for the air. It was essentially a nice looking garden. So in that area, he's not allowed to hang things on the wall, because that's not what it's built for. It's not made for that purpose. Now this is Rav Nachman in the name of Rabba Bar Avuah. For Rav Nachman Dideyam, and Rav Nachman himself says, he's even allowed to use this area where this nice garden is, but in the yard that's behind the houses, that he's not allowed to use. Rava Amar, and Rava says, he's even allowed to use the yard that is behind the houses. And Rashi explains, the yard behind the house is kol hekef sha'achore habatim kore rechava. Rashi says that the entire open area there that's behind the house is that we refer to as a rechava, v'shelefnei habatim, and then the yard that is the front yard in front of the house is kore chotzer, that's called a chotzer. Ein harechava muskeres lo lishtamish. The point over here is that the rechava is not rented out to this individual. He's not allowed to use it. Again, that was the opinion of Rav Nachman himself. He said the rechava he can't use. Rava said even the rechava he's allowed to use. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravina says, Hai kshura de metalalos, if there's a beam that is used for shade, at tlosin yomin lo have a chazaka. For 30 days, it's not yet a chazaka, but basar tlosin yomin, but already after 30 days have a chazaka, then the person already has a chazaka, that he's allowed to use the beam in that fashion. V'isukah de mitzvah, now if it's a sukkah for the mitzvah of sukkah, meaning to say on the yontav of sukkah, sad shiva yomin it lo have a chazaka, so for 7 days it's not a chazaka. Basar shiva yomin have a chazaka, but after 7 days, it is going to be a chazaka. V'chibrei betina, now if he attached it with some kind of clay, this Rashi quoted earlier in the previous Amud, so then lialter have a chazaka, then immediately it is going to be a chazaka. And Rashi explains, lo have a chazaka, it's not a chazaka, again, when he's using this beam for the shade. It said, Ravina said that it's not a chazaka for 30 days, after 30 days it is, meaning him samcha al kosel chaver. Let's say he took this beam, and he leaned it against his neighbor's wall, against his friend's wall, v'lo micha besoch shloshim yom, and there was no protest within 30 days, lo have a chazaka. That's not a chazaka, liton v'lomer peyastich b'mos adolam, that he can now claim, I appeased you in this fashion, and you allowed me, I got permission from you to use it in this fashion, I gave you some money for this, that I could use it this way forever. That's not a chazaka. T'chol tzulas and yomin lo kapit inish, because for 30 days people don't care, v'lo machi, they don't protest, savar chavri zet tzarech letzel, he just thinks, my friend over here needs a little shade, well, l'yamim muatim yitzlenu misham, in a few days he's going to take it away. And then the Gemara said, "V'sukkah the mitzvah he levasar zayin have a chazaka." Now, if it's a sukkah for the mitzvah of sukkah, so then after 7 days it's a chazaka. Tekevan deshavkua lo yoser minatzorech have a leilam chuya. Because again, if he's having the sukkah over here and he allowed him to have it beyond what is needed for the mitzvah, so then he already should have protested. The fact that he didn't protest, therefore there is a chazaka. And Rashi continues with an additional note to midelo micha, from the fact that the person did not protest. Equal amemar does that paiso b'mos adolam. We can say that he got permission permission, he paid him to have it this way forever. Rashi says this was like a normal thing to set up a sukkah for all the years, meaning to say every sukkah you'll just use the same sukkah. They wouldn't rebuild their sukkah every single year. That's why immediately after the 7 days pass, have a chazaka that's considered to be a chazaka. It's not similar to when he just sets up a sukkah for the purpose of shade. And over there it's not a chazaka until 30 days. Because that he's just making for shade. But this particular sukkah, the reason he's making it is because he wants to use it every single sukkah every year, and so therefore immediately after 7 days already, it's going to be a chazaka. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, Shnei batim v'shnei tzidei Rishus Harabim, if there are two houses on two sides of the Rishus Harabim, and the concern over here is that each person, when he's on his roof, he'll be able to see his neighbor's roof. So the way to avoid that is Zeh osamaka lechatzi gago. This one makes a fence for half of his roof. V'zeh osamaka lechatzi gago. The other one makes a fence for half of his roof. Zeh shelo keneged zeh. And the fences are not opposite one another, and therefore the view, the visibility is entirely blocked. Umadif, and also the fences go a little bit more, meaning a little bit more than halfway. There's a little bit of an overlap, and again, that will prevent the hezek re'iyah, that will create a sufficient amount of privacy. And the Gemara says, why does this case, why does Abaya speak of a case specifically where the houses are on two sides of Rishus Harabim? Afilu Rishus Hayachid Nami, even if it was a Rishus Hayachid, even if it was a private area, the halacha should be exactly the same. And the Gemara says, Rishus Harabim Mitzrichale. The reason why I said Rishus Harabim, it was necessary to teach it specifically in that case. Because Ma'u Detema, what might you have said? Neimolei, let him say to him, Sof Habois Litzdanue, Mi B'nei Rishus Harabim. Don't you anyhow, and since you're corresponding to Rishus Harabim, you need to have privacy from the people of the Rishus Harabim. So why do I need to build a fence? You need to build a fence anyways, because you need privacy from those in the Rishus Harabim. And so therefore you might say that both parties, one can't compel the other to build a fence. Kamash Malon, so that's what Abai is teaching. The Yamar Lay, that he can say back to him, Rabim biyamama chazuli, Belel yelo chazuli. The Rabim, meaning those who are in the Rishus Harabim, they see me during the day, they don't see me at night. But when it comes to you, Bein biyamama, Bein Belel yachazisli, you're able to see me daytime and at night. And the Gemara continues, Inami or Rabim ki koimna chazuli, when it comes to those in the Rishus Harabim, if I'm standing, they can see me. Ki yasivna lo chazuli, but if I'm sitting down, they don't see me. Ad chazisli, bein ki koimna, bein ki yasivna. You see me whether I'm standing or sitting. So again, there's a special level of privacy that is needed from you. And Rabim, furthermore, those in the Rishus Harabim, ki ma'ainu chazuli, if they're looking, they see me. Ki lo ma'ainu lo chazuli, if they're not looking, they don't see me. At memela nami chazisli, you're going to see me even if you're not really trying to see me. And so therefore, again, that's why it's possible for them to compel each other to build these fences, again, each one building a half of a fence. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, we just said above, Zeh osamaka lechatzi gago, v'zeh osamaka lechatzi gago. This one makes a fence for half of his roof. The other one makes a fence for half of his roof. Zeh shelo keneged zeh. And again, the fences are not opposite one another. Umadef, and each one goes a little bit extra. There's a little bit of an overlap. And the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? Of course, that's what they do to prevent the hezek re'iyah. The Gemara says, Lo no tzrich, it's necessary. The kadem chad minayu v'avid. What happened over here is, one of them went ahead first, and he made his half of the fence. And so, Ma'u Detema, what might you have said? Neimolei idach, the other one can say, why do I need to build a half a fence? Shkol uzinka, v'avdias kule, in other words, I'll give you the expenses, and you just make a full fence, and I won't have any fence, it'll be the same result. Kamash Malon, so that's what it's teaching us. The Amar Lei, the other one can say back, at my time lo avadet, why don't you want to make a fence on your roof? Mishum de misra shisach, because it's going to cause a weakening of the walls. There's a certain amount of weight now that you're putting on the house. Anonami, so I also misra le'ashisai, I also don't want to put that weight on, and so therefore it's better that I have half of it and you do half on your house. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel. Rav Nachman says that Shmuel says, Gag hasamuch lechatzer chavero, if a roof is near the courtyard of one's neighbor, osa lo maka gavoa dalar amos, he has to make a fence that's 4 amos high. Aval ben gag legaglo, but between one roof and another, that's not necessary. For Rav Nachman didei, Rav Nachman himself says, Eino zakok ledalar amos, between one roof and another roof, it's not necessary to have a fence that's 4 amos high. Aval zakok lemechitzas asara, but it is necessary to have a fence that is 10 tfachim high. And Rashi explains, Gavo arba amos mishum hezek re'iyah. The reason why you need a fence of 4 amos, a wall of 4 amos, is because of hezek re'iyah, because of issues of privacy. Again, that's talking about from a roof to a chotzer. Avol ben gag legag, but from one roof to another, lo tzarech, there it's not necessary. Kedamin b'shmait and kamaisa, like we said in the early sugya, chotzer kaviyat tashmishay. A chotzer is something that's used often. V'gag lo kaviyat tashmishay. A roof is not used often. V'lo yadana b'hayidna de salakt, it's dana minach. Therefore, it's not known exactly when you're over there that the person's able to keep himself private in such a situation. Ein zokuklo, and so then we said that when it comes from one roof to another roof, it's not necessary ben gag legag arba amos gova. It's not necessary between one roof and another to have a fence or to have a wall that is 4 amos high. And again, the Gemara then went on to say, Rav Nachman says that's true. You don't need a wall that's 4 amos high, but you do need one that is 10 tfachim. We'll take a look at an earlier Tosas now. Tosas says, B'shnei tzidei Rishus Harabim. We had a case earlier of 2 roofs where a wall was required when they were on 2 sides of the Rishus Harabim. That seems to contradict what we're saying here, that you don't need to worry about privacy from one roof to another. And Tosas says, Omari, the Ri says, Dafka b'shnei tzidei Rishus Harabim, specifically on 2 sides of Rishus Harabim, she'eno echad margish b'chaveiro, keshe'ola begago she'yizor mimenu. One doesn't realize the other is on his roof, that he needs to be careful now. Miramina b'samach, we know this because soon the Gemara will say, that's the Gemara we just learned, avol ben gag legag lo, that from one roof to another, you don't need to have a wall because of hezek re'iyah. So that's how Tosas resolved the contradiction. In any case, Rav Nachman said that from one roof to another, you don't need a wall of 4 amos, but you do need one of 10 tfachim. And so the Gemara wants to clarify, Lamai, what's the purpose of this wall of 10 tfachim? Ila hezek re'iyah, if it's because of hezek re'iyah for privacy, arba amos bin, and then you need a wall of 4 amos. Ila nitfas olav kaganav, if it's just to demarcate which roof belongs to who, so that you can say that the guy's a ganav if he's trespassing. But Mesipas bi'al masagit, just have some kind of pegs to show where each property ends. And ila gedoyim mutalayim, let's say it's for small animals, goats and sheep, bechdei shelo yizdakar b'bas rosh sagi, as long as you have a separation that's enough that they're not able to cross it, that should be sufficient. And so the Gemara answers, Liolam lenitfas olav kaganav. Really, we are talking about showing where the end of the property is. That's the purpose of this 10 tvachim wall. But however, b'mesipas matzi mishtamidle, when it comes to a mesipas, if you just use pegs, so then the person can just say, oh, I just happened to cross over, but I wasn't really stealing. He can deny that was his intention. Amar mi mitzurei kamim matzirna. He can say again that he was just walking over. We'll see Rashi in a moment. But mechitzas asar, if you have a mechitz of 10 tvachim, lo matzi mishtamidle, he's not able to make excuses in such a situation. And Rashi explains, im nitfas kaganev shem yikonis lifnim min ha-mechitza l'shem genei v'nichnas. Again, maybe the point of this wall is that way we can tell if somebody is entering into property that's not his own, that he's like a ganev. And the Gemara then answered, if it's just a bunch of pegs, matzi mishtamid le v'lomar, he's able to give an excuse and say, chayfetz nafal miyadi al gagcha, something fell from my hand and it went to your roof, v'nichnasti etz l'chalito, that's why I went over there to take it. In other words, he can give some excuse, but you're not able to do that in a situation of a mechitzas asara. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following brisa. Im haya chatseiro lemala migago shel chavero. Let's say his courtyard is higher, it's at a higher elevation than the roof of his neighbor, ein in his kakin lo. So then it says there is no need in such a situation. And so the Gemara says, my lav is it not? Ein in his kakin lo klal. There's no need to do anything in such a case. And the Gemara says, lo no, ein niskakin l'dalet amos. It means you don't need a wall of 4 amos. Avol niskakin l'mechitzas asara. But it could be that you do need a mechitza that is 10 tefachim high, meaning to say it could be consistent with what Rav Nachman said. Rashi explains, let's say his courtyard is at a higher elevation than the roof of his neighbor, meaning the karka, the land of the courtyard, is actually at a higher elevation than the land of the house. So the owner of the chatzar does not need to make a wall between the courtyard and the roof. Since people don't really use their roofs, he's able to be careful from his neighbors that they shouldn't see him. And so again, the Gemara said, isn't the Brisa saying that you don't need any wall whatsoever? That was a question on Rav Nachman. And the Gemara said not necessarily. It could be that you need a wall of 10 tvachim. It just means that you don't need a wall of 4 amos. And the Gemara continues, Itmar, it was stated the following, Machlokas Amoroim, Shtei Chatzeros, let's say you have two courtyards, Zu L'mala Mizu, and one is at a higher elevation than the other. Amar Ravuna says, Tachton Bonim Michanegdo V'ola, so now they have to build a wall separating between the courtyards. Ravuna says the one at the lower elevation, everything corresponding to where he is, he has to build. V'elyon Bonim Michanegdo V'ola, but the upper one, he only has to participate in building the wall from his elevation and above. For Rav Chisda Amar, but Rav Chisda says, no, Elyon Messiah Milamata Uvona. The person who is at the higher elevation, he has to have a 50% share in the entire wall, even from the wall starting from the very bottom. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavasi de Rav Chisda, we have a brisa that supports Rav Chisda. Shtei Chatzero Zu L'mala Mizu. Again, if you have two courtyards, one's at a higher elevation than the other, Lo Yomar Ha'elyon Hareini Bona Mikenegdi Va'ola. The person who's at the upper elevation shouldn't say that I'm only going to take responsibility from the part that starts from where my chutzner is and up. Messiah Milmata Ubona. No, rather he has to help the person from the very bottom of the wall, help him build it all the way. He has to have 50%. He has to cover 50% of the expenses. And again, that is like Rav Chisda. Then this is the case we had earlier. If his courtyard is at a higher elevation than the roof of his friend, they're already Eino Zakuklo. There's no need for him to build a wall for privacy in such a situation. And the Gemara continues, Hanu Beitrei da Havadayri Chad Havadayri Eloi. There were two people living. One lived in the upper floor and one lived in the lower floor. This was a two-story building. And itvar tatoi, what happened was that the lower floor was breaking, what it means to say it was sinking into the ground. You can no longer live there properly. Amar le tasoi li loy, so the person who lived on the lower floor said to the person on the upper floor, Tav v'nivla, let's destroy this whole building, let's rebuild it, and that way I'll be able to live on the lower floor. Amar le said back to him, Ano shaper kadir, no, why do I have to do that? I'm living fine on my upper floor. It's only you that has the problem. And Rashi explains, Davidai richadi loy v'chad tasoi, keshecholku ha'achin. The case over here is that brothers divided this building. Not al zabayis v'zaliyah. This one took the lower part. This one took the upper story. Itvar tatoi means nitvu haksolim hatachtonim ba'aretz. The walls of the lower one, they sunk into the earth. At sheshafla tikras v'aliyah. So already now everything was so low. Vein hatachton yochel likonis besocho. So the person living in the lower floor couldn't even enter ele imkein shocha unless he bent down. And so therefore he said to the person on the upper floor, Tav v'nivnei bo v'nistor as kol habayis v'nivnenu. Let's destroy the entire house and then we will rebuild it, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Zayin Amud Aleph.